Dr. Bitkoff.
Hi, Daniel. How are you?
Well, I'm finer than frog here, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Well, welcome to the Edge Television broadcast, Doctor.
Thank you very much. I've been looking forward to this all day and a few days now.
Well, that's kind of the excitement that we generate, man. People coming on this program. This is a freewheeling show, Doctor. Basically, as we talk, there are people who are watching the show and people who are listening on TuneIn Radio, and then there's others that are talking in our live chat back and forth. And so we'll take questions as they come in. So it may not necessarily be exactly where we are in the conversation, but so we got you on the show, Doctor. And why don't you sort of introduce yourself to our audience tonight?
Okay, my name's Stuart Bitkoff. I have a doctorate in education. I spent most of my work life working around the New York City area in the psychiatric hospitals. And in my early 20s, I wasn't looking for it, but I ran across a spiritual master kind of a guy, and that changed the direction of my life in a lot of ways. And as life went on, I also entered into another spiritual school. I have raised a family, lived in this culture for, and my gray hairs now. And we're on this show right now to talk a little bit about one of the books that I've written called the Appleseed Journal. And what I also found out through going through life and finding out who I was that I had a capacity to write about spiritual subjects. Not only did I have an interest in it, which I never was aware of until really my mid-20s, but also I could write about it. And I'm on the show tonight to talk a little bit about some of the things that I've experienced and want to share with other people.
Mm-hmm. Well, as an old cowboy from the Midwest, I feel like life is like a trail, and you never know where that trail is going to end you up. But here you are, your trail's ended you right here tonight. So I would say it's a divine appointment of some kind. We'll see where that takes us. But you just mentioned there in your introduction that you said you found yourself. Was that how does that happen? Were you lost? I mean, not that's been funny, but what happened?
I think that's a good question. I think many people, and I can certainly talk for myself, and certainly during the times that I was growing up or reaching maturity, people were looking for answers. I mean, I think certainly one of the basic premises of some of the spiritual learning that I've been involved in is that we're all created with an empty place, a place inside us, and that makes us yearn for different things, and we don't really know what that is. And for some people, it drives people in all different directions. And so I was searching for something and didn't realize what I was looking for. And as I was an adolescent, I played sports, dated girls, tried drugs, sex, whatever.
Whoa.
And I was looking for something, and that empty place inside of us provides a friction that pushes us on looking for different things. And so I wound up being married, going to graduate school, and then one day a friend of mine introduced me to a spiritual kind of a master kind of a person. It happened at work, and that sort of changed the course of my life. I mean, through my early years, I wasn't interested in religion, wasn't interested in spirituality or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, the idea of an empty place in one's, now some people would say soul or their heart or their body, has been used in sort of religious circles, in that they say that there's a hole in one's person's soul that can only be filled by God's presence. Now, does that fit anywhere into what your thinking is on the matter?
Absolutely. There's lots of different terms. One of the terms that, at least when I was learning about it, the term God bothers a lot of people. So we were taught to use the word God or light, because light dissipates darkness. And we were created with this empty place so we could go and do things. Without this emptiness or need to push ourselves, we would just sit around and just being happy all the time. And so this emptiness or this void And lots of religions talk about it. Certainly what I was schooled in was a form of mysticism that came through the Sufi schools. And that's certainly one of the basic premises, that we're born incomplete, by that meaning that there's this emptiness inside of us that can only be filled by the light or God. Mm-hmm. And once that happens, it isn't a static thing. You know, we all have everyday worries, everyday concerns, and that blocks the light, if you will, the lovingness of the universe from really entering into us. If I'm upset driving to work because somebody cuts me off, I'm not filled with light and love at that moment. I'm happy to be alive. Mm-hmm. And so what you learn is that there's a give and take here, a going out and coming back. We go to God or we go to the light, and then the real world or the everyday world rears its head, and we have to focus on what's in front of us, and we have to deal with that as a full-fledged human being with emotions, thoughts, and feelings.
So this void does seem to be a recurring theme across the spectrum of religions, and I don't know how much of the sort of the secular spiritual searchers agree with that. I mean, you may be in agreement, but it does seem to be a general theme. So there does seem to be some cooperation, some consistency to that. Okay, well, there is a void, well recognized over the eons of time of the human struggle of life, and then I would assume that most of the answers are that there is. Perhaps, I mean, if you say, I don't know if you're saying created with a void or we just hatched, I don't know where you're coming out with that, but
part of our hardwired.
So, okay, hardwired by somebody or something, some designer, something caused that void, or perhaps for the evolutionists among us, the evolutionists didn't, that part of it never got evolved into a complete thing. I don't know, which there's a lot of angles to view that, but then recognize that there is this void. But now, does each sort of religion or viewpoint or theologian believe that it's up to each individual to fill it with whatever they want to fill it with, or is there a central truth of what exactly it takes to fill that void?
Well, once again, I can't speak for all religions and all sects and all denominations. All I know is that in the mystical schools, what you're basically taught is that because we have so many dimensions, so many levels to us, people seek to fill that with all kinds of things. Some people seek to fill that with money. Some people seek to fill that with work. Some people seek to fill that with drugs and alcohol. And this restlessness, this burning, not knowing what that's about, that pushes us on. So we seek to fill it at its highest levels when we are able with the light of creation. So during the day, we have all kinds of restlessness, burnings, things that push us forward. Mm-hmm. In the book, the Appleseed book, I talk about Johnny being a restless soul. There was something in him that pushed him on, that he didn't know what it was, couldn't put a name to it. And when you read about great artists, great musicians, people who create things, there's a burning emptiness, restlessness that pushes them on. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just part of us. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the way we're hardwired. I mean, otherwise, if we were content and happy all the time, who would do anything?
You mentioned sometimes the word God scares people, and I wonder if that I wonder if that is in the same realm that's happening in the universities today as they're having walkouts and stuff. That the name Trump is scaring the crap out of people, and they're running out of the universities and they're demanding coloring books and things. I'm wondering if in that same strand, is that what some people, how they respond to God? Is that, they go running and say, well, I don't want to talk about God because he's this guy that he's always wanting to punish people and throw them into hellfire. Sort of like, see how I'm saying the comparison between what people are assuming Trump is going to do to them, has them reacting in such a way that they're going into fetal positions and running for the hills. Versus say, there are some that say God is a big ogre. He wants to throw you in hell. He's waiting for you to screw up and smash you like a bug. And so they don't they don't want nothing to do with God. And so they go searching somewhere. There's got to be somebody other than this God who I fear is going to kill me. And why would I want that? And over time, people have helped that sort of view, right or wrong, or, but is that the kind of comparison we're looking at here?
Well, we've got a number of things to talk about. Basically, what you're talking about is our response to fear, our fight or flight response. What's hardwired in us since the beginning of time, since we were, millions of years ago, is our fight or flight response. When we perceive an enemy or something bad that's going to happen to us, within 1/7 of a second, psychologists tell us, we either fight it, or we run away from it. So that's hardwired into us. Now, one of the biggest ways to manipulate people, and everybody's seen this in their own families, in the universities, in religion, and at work, is the fear or reward system. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, I'm working for this company, and my boss says, Stu, if you don't do this job, you're going to get fired. Okay, but if you do a real good job, I'll reward you. Now, some religions do the same thing. What they say, well, here's our list of 15 things you need to do to be a good whatever, Christian, Jew, Muslim, whatever it is. If you do these things, you'll be considered good, and you will go to heaven. If you don't do them, bad things will happen to you. We'll throw you out of the church. We'll throw you out of the synagogue, and you'll probably go to hell. So this fear or reward thing really ties into this fight or flight thing that is part of human nature. Mm-hmm.
So you're saying when a human struggles, they either fight or they run from it. Is that, or?
What I'm saying is, if you perceive a danger, somebobody's coming up to you, and you're walking in the street, and you see this guy coming at you who you know is bad, real bad, mm-hmm. and you have two choices. Usually within 1/7 of a second, you make a decision either to say, I'm going to hold my ground, I'm going to fight this guy, or I'm going to run from that situation.
Okay, so
that's called the fight or flight response.
But you're not saying then necessarily that flight is a bad thing. It seems like there's some wisdom involved there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now when we switch it over to perceived danger, because that's what everybody is worried about with Trump. Everybody is perceiving him as whatever, and there's some history there. Now, when we talk about God, when we talk about what religion has done with people, some religions, not all religions, and not all practices of this, are trying to manipulate people. Mm-hmm. They're trying to control people. Come on, let's get over this. See it for what it is. At work, they're trying to control you. Mm-hmm. It's very few environments that at work that will tell you, yes, you can be a creative type and do whatever you want. Mm-hmm. Everybody reports to a boss mm-hmm. who puts out laws and rules. Mm-hmm. The same thing is with what's happened in religion, okay? Because it's a authoritarian structure. Mm-hmm. The people in charge are trying to control people.
Mm-hmm. We're talking about fight or flight.
Right.
And I see a question came in from Steve Ells out of the live chat, and he says, I guess this is along that little conversation we just had about the university. He said, do you believe that the universities have turned people into passive kittens? And I guess he said, what's your take on these kittens? I guess using the cat term, but perhaps what he's saying is that there is a generation there. There's something generational that's in the college universities, and the way they are responding, that seems to it's not just a couple people, it's a lot of them. They must come to some conclusion that they are enveloped in fear. Now, is that were they taught that, or where's all this coming from, Doctor?
Okay, I went to many colleges. I taught in lots of colleges. I am a product of that environment. Once again, we're trying to generalize here. It's hard to do that because sometimes you run across a really good teacher who makes you think for yourself, all right? But by and large, any authoritarian structure, system, controls students, parishioners, worshipers through fear and reward. It's subtle. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, sometimes you have to buy into the rules. Like if I'm a college student and I want to major in, well, I majored in recreation, let's say. First 2 years, I got to take all these general courses. The next 2 years, I'll take my specialty courses. Now, if I go to the dean and I say, well, I don't agree with you. I don't want to take all of these courses. Well, they'll show me to the door. Okay? But if I do well and I follow what they say, they'll reward me and I'll get a degree. You can only fight against the power structure so much. Now, to go back to this fellow's point, are they making us into kittens? Are they making us into automatons? He didn't say that. Are they trying to feed things down our throats? Well, in the beginning learning, some things are by rote. Think about when you first learn mathematics. You memorize stuff. There's basic learning, and then later on, you get maybe a teacher or two or advanced courses where you can think for yourself. Do I think by and large that there needs to be a change in some of the way things are taught? Yes, but there are other universities that have open curriculums where you could choose things. So I don't want to generalize, but so much. Yeah,
and interestingly, that just triggered a memory for me. I was going to a university in Indianapolis for electrical engineering, actually, and I had to take a speech class. And well, this is pre broadcast days, and so, but I was kind of outspoken anyway. But as I was in there, they said you have to have a speech that is convincing. In other words, you have to convince the audience. Any good speech would do that. And so I'm watching. I wanted to, kind of laying back there, seeing what other people were going to talk about. And one person talked about how to play volleyball, one how to fly fish. But I was a little bit more interested. I was interested in other subjects, and my subject was the 4 methods of abortion. And I'm not, okay. We had to discuss the pros and cons of that, but that was what it was. It was the 4 methods. There are 4 methods, clinical methods of abortion. But, fortunately though, I went around and I sampled the audience there, the class, and I said, hey, I'm about ready to give a speech on, what do you guys think? And they're all for it. So I give the 4 methods of abortion speech. And after the speech, the female instructor, pulled me aside after everybody left, and she pointed to me. She said, you, Mr. Ott, are a very dangerous man. I said, I am? I said, why? She said, because you had those people believe in you. And I said, but that was the point of the speech. You said that you said that I was supposed to convince. And she said, well, yes, but you mentioned Democrats, liberals, feminism, women's rights, and I'm a member of all those, and I cannot give you a good grade. I was thinking, wow, man, what happened to free thought and free speech? She just said I did exactly what I was supposed to, but she was not going to allow me to continue in that class. And so I was a little disheartened from that, but that goes to the whether or not there is actually free speech on college campuses. And I tend to think that there isn't. There seem to be liberalism mills. And again, I don't know where you are on that, but whether you may even like liberalism for that matter, but that is what it is in my view.
Well, once again, this was this lady's class, and so she felt she could do whatever she wants. Do I think she was right with you? No, I don't think she was right. But once again, you're talking about power structures. When any power structure, whether it be academic, and particularly academic people, I don't want to use the word small-minded because I have a lot of friends who are academics, and a lot of academics are free thinkers and enjoy controversial topics. But you talk about being stuffy and trying to go along with everybody in order to get ahead. It's the same kind of a thing. I mean, what's important for the spiritual traveler is to see the manipulation in front of them, to know they're being manipulated. Look, the fear and reward manipulation is going on. I mean, that's what Trump was doing. He was scaring the heck out of everybody.
Did he scare you?
Okay? And it wasn't scaring me, but it was scaring a lot of people that I know. And the reward would be to vote for his politics. Now, I'm not even getting into politics, right or wrong, who's right on a given issue. I'm just talking about a manipulation. Once they have you emotionally involved in something, it's harder to think clearly. Okay, that's my point here. Yeah. Now, and as a spiritual traveler, well, why do I want to get past emotion? Emotion is very good for a lot of things in life. You need to be enthusiastic about work, a lot of things, love. I mean, there's a lot of positive emotion things. But when we're talking about spiritual traveling or spiritual, learning, emotions have to be pushed aside for a time so something else could come forward. That's why knowing about the fear and reward manipulation is critical, particularly in the era in which we're in. You watch TV all the time. All the news shows try to scare the hell out of you.
Well, I'll tell you what.
You'll do something.
Okay, all right. I'll tell you what. We've given a kind of an intro to the spiritual conversation and analysis that we're going to have, and we're gonna and it's interesting because we're going to use your book. The Appleseed Journal there, and I put that in my background a couple times, the book cover, and I'll put it back in there again here real shortly. But I always considered Johnny Appleseed just somebody who planted apple trees. I had no idea that he had a spiritual journey. Now, is that because these same forces that we're talking about hid his spiritual journey from us?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know about conspiracy. All I know is that this is the way that idea came to me. I'm living we're living in New York, north of New York City, and it's pretty rural up there. There's still rural up there, and 40 miles north of New York at the time, and there are plenty of apple orchards. So our house was built on something called Apple Orchard Estates. And people were always coming up there to pick apples, and this thing was going on. Then one day it occurs to me, because I remember the Walt Disney bit with Johnny Appleseed being this guy going around, this person just going around throwing apple seeds everywhere all across the United States, being the father of apple trees everywhere. And I'm saying to myself, I'm on Apple Orchard Estates. I wonder if Johnny planted any apple trees up here. Then I'm saying, what kind of, I'm working in a psychiatric hospital all the time, I'm going to have for many years. What kind of person just goes around, throws, planting apple trees everywhere? A solitary person doing this. So my thought on this was, well, only a lunatic would do this, or somebody who is on a mission from God. And so I started doing some research. And it turns out that he was on a mission from God. He was a Swedenborgian minister from the Church in New Jerusalem. And also, just like lots of other people, he was a husbandman who planted apple trees, because apples had a big part in the Western movement for settlers. Now, whether or not why that was hidden from us, I don't know. I mean, I live in Pennsylvania now, where they have lots of off the beaten road religious sects, groups. And I've always been interested in those things. And the Church in New Jerusalem, I think, has 5,000 members in it worldwide. And that's Swedenborg's church. And so, I did some reading, that kind of a thing on it, because I was interested in it. And so that got me thinking about this, and this book gave me the opportunity to put some of the ideas that I learned in mysticism and Sufism into it. Because, as we were talking about earlier, this empty place in us turns up in a lot of different religious presentations or spiritual presentations. Now, why we didn't know Johnny Appleseed was a Swedenborgian minister, all we saw was this thing on Walt Disney where he was just singing songs and planting apple seeds.
Swedenborg minister, what is that?
Swedenborgian minister. This guy's name was Swedenborg. He was the head of the mines in, I forgot what country it is. I wrote it in the book here. Okay. He was a world-known scientist, a mineralogist. was a great scientist. And then in his 50s, the religious call hit him, and he began writing of his visions. And he wrote like 30 volumes on it.
Wow.
And his name was Swedenborg.
Mm-hmm.
And so a church came, grew up over the years. I think he died 3 years before Johnny Appleseed was born, like in 1772 or 73. And so a church sprung up. It's called the Church of New Jerusalem. And in the colonies, people forget this about America. That America was one of its founding principles, besides not, a place to grow and create your own fortune and get away from the monarchies in Europe, was freedom, religious freedom. Mm-hmm. So there were lots of people with lots of religious leanings in the early parts of our country. And so the Church of New Jerusalem had its main headquarters in Philadelphia. Still does.
Interesting. Now, he died in 1845, right?
Right, in Indiana, I believe.
Okay, well, all right. That's my favorite state right there.
Okay,
right. By the way,
and I think there's a statue in Mansfield, Indiana, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost a connection there, because the capital, of course, is Indianapolis, huh? Come on now. Right there. I'm just saying it's working. It's really working tonight. But pre-1820, I don't believe that early America allowed the celebration of Christmas. So he must have been within that realm in those years.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm just saying. Well, that's sort of a religious holiday for a lot of folks, but they didn't celebrate it back in his days. So I'm just wondering if the church that he was a part of also didn't believe in the celebration of Christmas, because I believe they thought it was
I don't know.
pagan.
He believed in Jesus. I mean, this church believed in Jesus. Mm-hmm. So I don't know whether they had that particular celebration or not.
Did that church have any sort of quirks? Say, like the Quakers, didn't they shake or something, and that's why they called them the Quakers? Did the Swedenborg Church, did they have any of those type of things?
Well, I'm not really sure. I'm really not an expert on that. One of the things that I did see an article on off of their website was, when we're talking about apple grafting and that kind of a thing, the best way to assure when you plant an apple tree to make sure you get so if you have a golden delicious apple and you want to make sure you plant a golden delicious apple tree next to it, the best way to do that is not from the seed of the apple. It's from taking a graft off the golden, delicious apple tree you have and then putting it in the ground. Mm-hmm. And according to the Swedenborgian website, they don't believe in doing grafts like that, grafting, because they believe they harm the tree. It causes harm to them.
Wouldn't that make him a heretic?
Well, if he did that, yeah. And if that's true, I mean, I don't know. In my writing of the book, I talk about Johnny planting trees with seeds and taking grafts off of trees.
Do you have
that's the best way to assure things.
Do you have any idea how many trees or orchards that he did plant?
Well, for sure, he worked in 4 different states, and he owned tracts of land. He was a landowner. He was, they don't use the word wealthy, but he certainly had money, because he worked in New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana. In Pennsylvania and Ohio and Indiana, they have records of where he owned land. Now, in the Western movement, when people were moving west, in 1792, there was something called the Ohio Associates Company. They would give 100 acres of land to a family that wanted to settle right on the frontier. They would give them 100 acres of land. And in order to seal that, to make sure that that land became theirs, they had to grow, I think, 50 apple trees and 20 peach trees. I mean, I guess that gave stability. Mm-hmm. And from what I was reading is that it usually takes 10 years for an apple tree to bear fruit that you could eat or use for cider. Mm-hmm. It seems in the frontier, a lot of apples that were grown were used for cider. There was a lot of drinking going on there because they couldn't trust the water, and also I would think because of all the hardships. But anyway, apples not only were a staple to eat and for apple cider, but it was also a way of making sure you owned the land because it was part of the, I guess, the agreement that you went into with at least one of these companies that would give you those 100 acres for free.
Is there any significance to his drive to plant apple trees, say, versus peach trees or other kinds of trees? Any significance to that?
I think because of, one, their hardiness.
Okay.
I mean,
that was nothing spiritual about the fact. I mean, I guess the only thing that somebody would say is, as they probably wrongly say, Eve gave Adam an apple. Yeah, but I don't actually believe it says apple. It's just something somebody wrote one time.
Yeah, I think so too.
So they've always had this kind of apple euphemism thing going on. So I don't know whether maybe he got it from there. Maybe there's some significance from that.
Well, I don't even know if that was available to him at that time. It's hard to know. I wouldn't know that. Maybe some preachers were talking about that, but clearly apples were of economic value, and they were good to help you get some land, and also for barter, for trade, and also for sustenance. And they could grow, fairly easily. I mean, even in this deed with the Ohio Company of Associates, it was 50 apple trees and 20 peach trees. And so that just goes to show that apples were valued more than the peach trees. Now, also he was into herbs. He would grow herbs, use them, and give them away to people for their coughs and as a medicinal thing. For horehounds and did different medicinal herbs. And a lot of people considered him a medicine man. He would give away these herbs to the settlers. He would make friends with them, and he would, if they didn't have apple seeds, he would give them the seeds. He would give them the medicines they would need to get through the winter, and then also he would minister to them. The Swedenborgian thing. He would buy books. And he would break them apart and share them with people. So he saw this as his life's work, doing that.
Did he ever grow the magic herb?
Nobody says that. I'm sure it was growing wild back then.
Well, I mean, herb's herb, man, and marijuana now seems to have a lot of medicinal purposes there.
I haven't seen that on any website yet, so maybe somebody who's listening knows about that. Knows about
the herb. Okay, so now to grow herbs and various things indicates some sort of stationary. I always saw him as a traveler, but at some point he had to stop and do something there, plant something to let it grow in order to sell it, right? Unless he went out to harvest it and knew what it was.
Absolutely, and also he owned the land too. He owned some tracts of land that were left to his family when he died. So. In the book, basically, I talk about him setting up apple orchards in this place, and he would tend them, and then he would ask people to help tend them, take care of them. But historically, no, he owned land in 3 different states.
Somebody asked the question, was Johnny Appleseed, and I believe his original name actually was John Chapman. Did he refer to himself as Johnny Appleseed, or is that just somebody wrote something in a book, a kid's book one time?
I think he did both. I think he did both.
Okay. Somebody wants to know, was he a prepper?
A who?
A prepper. That sounds kind of early. Somebody who stocks up for some sort of Armageddon type of thing. Did he believe? I guess let's do this. I'll extract a question from that. Did he believe in an Armageddon type of thing, or a return of Christ, or the end of time, tribulation type of beliefs?
I would guess he did. I would think so. I mean, I don't know for sure, to be honest with you. But when I was reading the works of Swedenborg, he was heavily into Christian mysticism. He saw visions and that kind of a thing. And so, and being raised up, he was raised as a Christian. I don't remember what denomination in Massachusetts. So I would bet that he had some leanings towards that, or knew about that.
Well, I have some land, and I sort of have decided that whatever I put on the land is either got to be some kind of food, fruit or berry, or it has to be good for butterflies, bees, or hummingbirds. And in my research of what plants to plant, I came across something called the pawpaw tree. Now, it turns out that the pawpaw tree was planted in early America, I believe, more than the apple trees were in the beginning, and they were used as hedgerows too as well, the pawpaw. And by the way, a little factoid, the pawpaw tree is the only tree that the swallowtail butterfly will lay its eggs on. So if people notice there's hardly any of those around, it's because there's no pawpaw trees around. So did in your research, did you ever come across anything about the pawpaw tree?
No, I'm just the first I'm hearing it from you. So I'm learning something as you're talking.
Okay, I'm going to sing a little song. It says, "Where's little Susan? She's way down in the pawpaw patch." You ever heard that?
Yeah, that I've heard.
Okay, well, that's where that came from. Just giving you some tree stuff, man. All right, okay. So where and when, Doctor, was sort of the first spiritual entry into his life that he went from, say, what his teaching was to living out a spiritual life or seeking out spiritual, being a spiritual traveler type of person?
Well, early on, I mean, because don't forget, back in the 1780s, 1790s, when he's living in Massachusetts, New York, that's all on the frontier. You know, you go a few miles and you're on the frontier. You go into Pennsylvania, you go into western New York, you're all on the front. Those areas are not, you know, nobody's in them but Indians. So very early on, because they were farmers, and very early on, he had this wanderlust kind of a thing, need. Historically, he and his stepbrother, Nathaniel, head out, I think, in early 1802 or something on their own. Now, in my story, I have him going on walks and just needing to find himself and find what's on the other side of the hill as early as the age of 16, doing that. And he runs into settlers who is a friend of the family, and an Indian who helps teach him in the ways of living on the frontier. Mm-hmm. Because obviously he had to learn this from somebody. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, he and his brother, even though they set out, I think it was in 1802, away from their home, mm-hmm. as they went further and further west, that being west, you know, middle Pennsylvania, western Pennsylvania, that was on, then you get into Ohio, you're on the edge of the frontier by that time. So in order to survive, he would have had to learn certain skills from somebody. And a lot is unknown about where he learned those things. Mm-hmm. I guess an authoritative book on him was written mm-hmm. by a fellow at Oberlin College in 1952. Mm-hmm. And that may have some of those kinds of things that people want to know, that Johnny Appleseed, Man and Myth, mm-hmm. by a fellow named Robert Price. Mm-hmm. That's considered one of the authoritative texts on him. But a lot's not known about his life. Yeah. Okay. And so that gave me a lot of opportunity to make up the notion of the journal, and that he has a message for modern America, because clearly we need some help here.
We certainly do, and we'll get really deep in that in the second hour after our 9 o'clock break. But right now we've got a question from our moderator, Jade. She says, did Johnny Appleseed become a vegetarian due to his love of animals?
Don't know.
All right. Okay. All right. We have another question.
Does this person know? Does the person know themselves? Do they know that he was a vegetarian?
No, I'll just put that down as can't answer that. Well, let's go to this next one there for you, Doctor. Steve Ills asks, did Johnny Appleseed make it to Canada?
I don't know. All that I was able to say is his travels through those 4 states. Oh. Ohio, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Indiana.
Now, some of his orchards are still in production today, aren't they?
No, I'm not sure that they are. They're there, like in my backyard. There was a crab apple that I thought might have been. I was reading one article on something was that the real Johnny Appleseed brought apples and booze to the American mm-hmm. frontier. This was this article I was reading, and it was written in 2014, and said there was actually somebody claimed that they had a 175-year-old tree in their yard that was something that John Chapman had planted. That was in Nova, Ohio.
Okay, Doctor, hang on. This isn't to you. This is directed to Grandma in our live chat. This show actually, Doctor, we actually have our own Grandma part of the. She's in our live chat all the time. So, Grandma, do you remember the song "Where's Little Susie Way Down Yonder in the Paw Paw Patch"? Am I the only one to know that song? All right. Okay. So that's a question out there. All right. So anyway, all right. So we're talking about Johnny Appleseed and his travels. And you said that he owned land, but when I heard an interview with you, I think you were talking about that he actually borrowed clothes. He seemed to be, a vagrant almost.
Yeah, that's right. That's the way he looks in pictures. That's the way he's portrayed in pictures, and from the accounts that I've read, and certainly the way I portrayed him in this book, he was, I don't know what the word is, very modest in what he wore and what he used. Mm-hmm. Burlap shirt, burlap pants, and, a funny-looking kind of a hat. He didn't spend a lot of money at all. Everybody says that. He would give his money away, actually, to people. So he was very modest in that, but in order to do his business of growing apples, he had to be pretty organized about certain things. And one of them was had a tent, because he was a good husbandman, and he was good with herbs. So one of the aspects to that was having land that you could use and then turn over to other people, sell to other people, give to other people. And so he was very organized about that. Well, and that's different than what you would think of, and certainly the basic premise that I would have that only a crazy man or somebody on a mission from God would go about leading a life like that. So there were a lot of myths about him, even in his time, about him.
And did he sort of capitalize on his own myth while he was alive?
I don't know. I would guess he did, because in the book, that's the way I portrayed him. He said, he makes a statement saying, after a while, I got tired of correcting people, and I just told them what they wanted to hear.
When he came to a place, did the news ever travel about who he was and what he did?
Oh, yeah.
And was there anticipation? Johnny Appleseed's coming to town?
Well, yeah, certainly. In the story that I tell, the little boy that lives next to him where he's wintering looks forward to hearing all his stories, because everybody knew a Johnny Appleseed story. Don't forget, this is the frontier, and this is this colorful character who's giving away things, helping people, helping them make the transition with herbs, with food, knowing where to fish, all of this, and he's spreading the word of God, and this is what he saw as his mission. So everybody had a Johnny Appleseed story.
Wow. All right, Dr. Stuart Bickoff, we're at the top of the hour. We take a 5-minute break. Anything you'd like to say about your website or any of your books, go right ahead.
Okay. If you're looking to know more about me, there's a lot of free stuff on my website, and also connections to my different books, written about 7 of them, and it's www.stuartbitkoff.com. Okay?
Okay. All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break, Doctor, and we're going to be right back with you, all right?
Okay, yep.
All right, everybody, you're watching and or listening to the Edge Television broadcast. On our Newsmaker line tonight is Dr. Stuart Bickoff. We're talking about the spiritual lessons that we can learn from none other than Johnny Appleseed. We're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll be right back. And welcome back to the Edge Television broadcast. My name is Daniel Ott. If you missed any of the first hour of this program, it will begin to replay in our main player directly after the show. We'll take the high definition extract and create a YouTube video and put it in our YouTube channel. Additionally, we'll put the audio into our TuneIn Radio playlist, which broadcasts across any device, any platform, playing 24 hours a day. That's our TuneIn Radio channel. Also, we'll put it in podcasts, so many ways that you can catch and listen to this broadcast, and click share and likes anywhere you find it. Now let's go back to our newsmaker line and bring back with us Dr. Stuart Bitkoff. Doctor, welcome back.
Hey, thank you.
Well, we're talking, we left off in the first hour, Doctor. We're talking about, and you said it, that as you researched it, you began to see things that lessons that we can apply to America today. And you said, I think you actually said, and we seriously need those lessons. Can you give us a couple of the things or lessons that you saw in his life that could be applied to help somebody today?
Well, the basic premise of the book is that this journal, and it's really a gift. It was buried in the ground, and it got uncovered, and it's to be shared, a spiritual message for modern America. And that's the point of the book. And one of the concrete things, and this is one of the things that I'm very interested in, is what is the role of spirituality in a day-to-day life? We live in America in a very hectic world where there's a lot of demands on our time and on our energy. And how does spirituality or a belief in something higher, and I'll go to the word spirituality again, really enhance our skill set, if you will, to use modern terminology? And Johnny talks about that, or I talk through that through using the vehicle of Johnny. And that's one of the things that we talk about. He talks about traveling light. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, Jim, we talked about this in the first hour, that Johnny didn't, while he owned tracts of land, he himself didn't have many possessions. And some of the possessions he did have, like the books, he shared with people and he gave away. Mm-hmm. So in the journal, we talk about traveling light through life. Mm-hmm.
How about yourself? Before we go on a little bit there, Doctor, have you lessened your load of possessions?
Well, once again, that's where I was going to get to. We're talking about attachment to possessions. Mm-hmm. Now, there was one time when we had 4 cars in the family. I had 2 teenage girls. My wife and I needed cars. And they were old jalops. Something was always going wrong. How is that traveling light? So that would be, the issue. Or you have a house and you have to take care of it. You have to work 2 jobs. It's a question of attitude. How do you do these things and not get enmeshed or overwhelmed by them? And it's a question of the spiritual classes, spiritual travelers use words like intention. Who am I doing this for? Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, what do I mean by this? Traveling light. Mm-hmm. If I'm giving up my worries, we all understand that by singing a song or using a device or turning it over in a prayer or an intention. Mm-hmm. Oh, Lord, help me to do this. Or, oh, light, help me to do this. I wrote a book about commuting to work every day. I had a terrible commute. I lived outside of New York City, and I had to drive to work. That was the only way I can get to work, driving right next to Manhattan every day. And how do you turn that into traveling light? Cars are backed up forever, Mm-hmm. And one stalled car at rush hour throws everybody out. Mm-hmm. How do you travel light? Mm-hmm. It's by turning it over. By offering it up to something higher than yourself or the highest part of yourself, by saying, oh, help me get through this moment or this terrible rush hour, my higher self, help me get through this, and oh, Lord, help me to do this. And you turn that over, and John talks about that under the circumstances in which that can work, and it can't work. At certain times, that can work very effectively. And we all need different things in our spiritual toolbox, different exercises, methods, different things to help us get through something different. So traveling light to John was not worrying so much about things, and he would turn those things over to the Great Spirit, or you know, the Father or Mother of the universe, however he would present it that way. And that's one of the spiritual kind of exercises that he talks about in the book, Traveling Light. And in America today, all of us, you know, we're in a consumer environment. You know, we're taught from a very early age, consume, consume, consume. And for a lot of us, after a while, okay, I've consumed enough. You know, how much more do I need to consume? And it doesn't fill me up. There's that empty place inside again. Mm-hmm. How do I fill that with something else? Mm-hmm. Now, that only works at certain times and under certain conditions. I mean, life is a full contact sport. Bad things happen to people. Mm-hmm. When bad things are happening to somebody, all they're trying to do is survive in the moment. So trying to turn your intention over to something higher may not work when I'm trying not to drown in a situation. But after that is over, I can then maybe reflect, go inward, and turn it over. Mm. And under less stressful situations, maybe I could do that.
All right, we have a few questions coming here. Well, now, put Yahweh first out of the live chat. Ask if Johnny Appleseed was fictional. Well, he was definitely not fictional, right?
No, they're a real person, John Chapman, mm-hmm. and the book that I wrote is based upon his life with fictional accounts. There mm-hmm. are plenty of straightforward historical documents and books written about him. The one that I noted was one by Robert Price, Johnny Appleseed, Man and Myth, mm-hmm. in 1954 by Oberlin College. Okay. That's considered one of the key ones.
All right, and then we have this question. What kind of interaction did Johnny Appleseed have with the American Indians?
He was considered a medicine man by them, or a special spirit. Really? He was very friendly with them. At one point, he's credited with saving a town from an Indian attack by running on ahead to let the settlers know that they were being attacked. Mm-hmm. Another time, he was credited by saving a lost girl who had been captured by the Indians. But the Indians themselves, many of them, considered him a special spirit and a medicine man.
I wonder if he picked up medicine ideas from the Indians, or did he give them medicine ideas?
Well, that was the premise I took. He learned that from the Indians, because I think all the settlers, mm-hmm. In the colonies, learned lots of things from the Indians.
Mm-hmm. Here's a great question. It says, today, as you look around, Doctor, who would you describe as the most Johnny Appleseed-like? Is there such a person? Would it have been Bob Dylan as he's going across the country, playing his harmonica?
It would be somebody who's living for other people and really doing their own thing in the process. Is really helping people turn heads upward, mm-hmm. just raise themselves mm-hmm. higher. So mm-hmm. someone like Bob Dylan certainly did that. Certainly some of the music people do that. Mm-hmm. But anybody who would fall into that kind of a category, because mm-hmm. he was on a mission to help people with food, medicines, and spirit. Mm. That's what he saw himself doing.
Now, that's interesting, because without addressing the spirit, or maybe the soul, or something inside of a person, when a doctor examines a patient, I mean, over the long term, if they don't address it seems to me, I'm not an expert in the matter, but if they don't address the spiritual component of their sickness or their beliefs, I've seen many reports that say that those that have faith, typically either their sickness is less, or they recover faster. And I'm not saying a particular faith. I'm just saying that there seems to be a spiritual component to the human person that needs to be addressed. And so what you're saying is that he had to wear wits about him to address that. He put that on an equal playing field. Is that right, or some part of it?
That's right. Well, that was his mission. That was the way he saw it. That's why the character intrigued me, because in the mystical school, what you're taught is to use all your capacities, all of these things. Okay? So if I work in a psychiatric hospital, I'm a therapist. If I'm a father, I attend my children. If I'm a husband, I help with my wife. I have all of these different many capacities, and I'm missing an essential one unless I use that, because that one integrates all the others and maximizes my skills, helps me reach towards excellence. We actually use that terminology, helping to create excellent human beings. The completed person is somebody who's added a degree of spiritual learning and capacity. Now, women are real good at this. They have natural intuition, a lot of women. But all of us have this intuition, this ability to know. And you access that by working on it. It's there in everybody. And just, what a lot of school systems or learning systems fail to do is look at the whole people, the whole person. We teach kids how to use their bodies and how to use their the cognitive part of their mind, read, write, and all of those things. We don't teach them about emotions too well, and we don't teach them about spirit. And those things, they say, are left to the family and the church or the synagogue, whatever. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be. I'm saying, but what happens is, and those are the people I worked with, who didn't get that learning because something was disrupted in the family or in the home or in the church. I worked with people who didn't learn about their emotions and couldn't control about their emotions. And what I'm saying is to create better people, and certainly our country needs the best people it can create. You need to work with the whole person, and Johnny knew that.
So your recommendation is that we all internalize a little Johnny Appleseed into our methodology.
We drink a little apple cider, and we say, let the magic begin.
Is it any recording of him having visions?
I really don't know. I would think he did. I would think because of who he was, and he was alone a lot, and he was in nature. And just from the training in the mystical schools that I've had, he was in tune with, some people said he could telepathically communicate with animals. I mean, a lot of people feel that animals are telepathic. And, we all have parts of our minds that we're not using, that we all have these aspects or capacities that we don't use. So I would think he was able to do that, whether or not he had visions. I mean, one of the things that really impressed me the most was about, I think it was the Oglala Sioux, that when a young boy was growing up, he was trying to have a vision that would lay out the whole course of his life. And I'm a young man. I'm in my 20s, and I'm reading this. Okay. I think the book was Black Elk Speaks. And I'm saying to myself, how foreign is that? I live in New York City. I'm going to have a vision that's going to lay out my whole life, and that's exactly what happens. Black Elk talks about his vision that he has, and it comes true during the course of his life. And what that taught me over the years, and I had to think about this an awful long time, is that with our minds and our consciousness, we have tremendous capacities to create things. So if I focus on wanting to create a vision, and that's part of my belief system in the culture that I'm in, it's got a good chance of happening. And what that taught me was that lots of things can be true.
That reminds me that's sort of corroborated by the scriptures that say if you have a faith of a grain of mustard seed, you should be able to say unto the mountain, be thou plucked up and be thou cast into the sea. But that's sort of a vision that is sort of, it seems to me, you say it, but you're visualizing that mountain in your life to go away. Is that in the same thread that you're talking about, in the same vein?
Well, we're talking about using our consciousness. I think what we're talking about is that human beings, you've heard this any number of times, have unlimited potentials. What exactly does that mean? Rumi, who's one of the great Sufi mystics, talks about that there are 1,000 forms of mind. Forms, F-O-R-M-S, of mind, M-I-N-D. Substitute for the word mind, consciousness. No, can I read people's minds? Hey, I met people who could do that. And once again, I'm in a psychiatric hospital. I know what it's like to be nuts. I've worked with people who are nuts. But I've met people who could read other people's minds.
I was going to say, in the event that's, in some circumstances, Doctor, is somebody that seems to be, to the rest of us, crazy, is it possible that, in fact, they're not?
I think it's possible, but highly unlikely, because, once again, there's been any number of books written on psychiatry and psychosis. One of the things if somebody is really not well or sick, is they suffer an awful lot. They don't have happy times.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. They're just not happy. They're in too much pain. They may start out, when somebody who was hallucinating, at first they might start out laughing and having a great time, but after a day or two they're crying and they're in tremendous pain. So one of the criteria for me, if I'm looking at a mystic or a holy man or a holy woman, one of the ways that I would look at it is, are they integrated into in the community in which they live, the world that they're in?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're crazy, you can't be.
Now, that doesn't sound very clinical, doctor, to call someone crazy.
You're absolutely right. But it works.
Okay. All right. All right. Now, here's a question. Did Johnny Appleseed, did he have a horse, or did he just walk everywhere?
I don't know. I would guess he had
what about this story?
Horse, certainly, to help till the orchard, to help, with...
Okay, so we don't know. We don't know if he had a horse.
No, I don't know. I don't know if he had a favorite, animal that he walked around with him.
Okay.
But he was on his foot a lot, and one of the things I read here was somebody described the soles of his feet as being so thick that a rattlesnake couldn't bite through them.
Mm-hmm. What about this story about him putting a fire out because he didn't want to kill any bugs?
That could be true, because the Swedenborgians don't believe in killing anything.
Mm-hmm. But in that circumstance, though, he could freeze to death too. So he's going to have to sacrifice some kind of bug. Seems like.
Oh, you're talking about a campfire?
Yeah,
no, I think he would have to have a campfire. No, I don't believe that.
So you don't think that story's not true?
Ants in a log or something like that he was worried about, but I think that he had to have a fire. And certainly in the book, I have him huddling around fireplaces, and there's one part where he's looking at the fire, the evening smoke rising up into the sky, and reminds him of his soul going back home. So no, I make use of fires a lot in the story.
Did he ever establish a church?
Well, he was a member of the Swedenborgian Church, so that was his church. And he believed that he would go yearly to this conference, a yearly conference in Philadelphia, where they would all meet, all the ministers would meet. And the setup for this book is that in the 1840s, just before the end of his life, he didn't go to a particular conference, and that's a historical fact. He never did show up. I don't know whether it was 1841 or 1842, and people didn't know where he was. And so I used that as a way to set up this story that he was wintering in the hills of the Catskills, and he was writing his journal.
Mm-hmm. Did he? I know he interacted with the Indians, but did he live with them?
He probably did. I have him as having a mentor, a teacher, and they would go on long journeys together.
Let me ask you something in this quote here. No one's life is easy. To each is a struggle. Only the perfected ones are able to look at pain and laugh. Is that you, or who is the perfected ones?
Well, I've met some perfected ones, and what it comes to mean is that we have moments of perfection, and then we have moments of imperfection. I've met some people who were completed people, some people, like I said, who are spiritual masters. And so they certainly had a different vision of many different things. And those people are few and far between. And the average person, like myself or anybody, has moments where they can touch perfection or can touch this element that connects everything in the universe. In our time, we're defining God as this God particle or this interconnected energy in everything. And when I was talking about the perfected ones are in touch with that part of themselves and that part of the universe that we would call the light, and are in that connection most of the time. Most of us come and go once we've done some studying in a spiritual school. Those moments, they call those states. There are spiritual states that come and go. Most of us have had tastes of this. You're walking in the woods somewhere, and you feel connected to everything, and you say, oh, my goodness, there's something higher or stronger than me in this universe. And so the perfected ones are in touch with that, more than most people or most of the time.
But you don't consider yourself in that realm?
It comes and goes.
Mm-hmm. So would you like to operate out of that realm, Doctor?
No, I need to live in this world. I once asked my teacher, now in the spiritual school, we have time for this. In the spiritual school, you talk about quieting the ego. The ego is, ego, superego. The ego is the everyday steward. Steward who wants an ice cream soda, steward who wants a new car, steward who wants his own way. And all of us, until we mature, have this ego thing. I want this now, I want it now, I want it now. So one day I asked the teacher, I said, look, how come we weren't created without this problem thing, this ego? Always getting in our way. We want this, we want that. If that stands in the way, why weren't we created without it? This way we could always be in touch with whatever out there, let's call it God, the light, and do whatever the God of the light wanted. And the teacher just put his pipe down, looked at me, and he smiled. And he said, the ego is the boundary between this world and the next. Yeah. Okay? You need your ego to participate in this world. Okay? So if we were created without it, we would be all absorbed in the other world and be of no use in this world.
So we find ego as helpful.
Essential to our life in this realm, whatever that means.
Well, if it's essential, should we get more of it?
Some people do, and it gets them in trouble. Mm-hmm. Well, what I'm trying to do is learn to push it aside temporarily. Mm-hmm. Push it aside. I'm using those words very specifically now. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm not crushing it. I'm not breaking it. I'm not bending it. I'm pushing it aside. Mm-hmm. So another part of me can come forward. And that's what meditation teaches you to do.
Mm-hmm. In entry 14, a mission from God ? Do you consider that Johnny Appleseed got a mission?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any question about it.
And specifically, what was the mission?
From God, if we listen to ourselves.
Okay. Specifically, what was that mission?
His mission was to be a front man, for the frontier, to help people with apple trees, herbs, and spread the word of God. It was all of those things. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So obviously, I mean, you're emphatic about that and believe that he did get a mission from God. Do you believe you have a mission from God?
Yes, I believe we all do. I believe we all come here with a skill set or a life plan. Mm-hmm.
So that could. Go ahead.
When you look at people, we're all different. I mean, some people are wonderful with cars and with mechanical things. Some people are good at writing. Some people are good with flowers. I mean, we all come here with a skill set, and you can call that a mission. You can put a fancy word to it. I call that a destiny.
Mm. You know? Well, I can see that people have specific skill set. I mean, certainly some people they call them a natural. They're naturally athletic, or they naturally can sing. For others, it's a learned thing. It takes a lot of hard work. I mean, Chuck Norris was that way. He was not a born athlete. He said that he just worked and worked and worked, where others, he had to fight people that it just came naturally. But of course, he ended up being world champion based just on his effort into what his dream was. But as far as the mission from God, though, I mean, I could see the mundane thing of you said, I use the word athletic, but maybe, and you said somebody's good with flowers or something, or somebody's good with planting trees. But the spiritual component, is the spiritual component all the same, or is it different as well?
Well, once again, when you listen to what the mystics teach, and what I believe is that your whole body, your whole consciousness operates on spirit. So everything I do is spiritual. Okay? So I'm cut off from that awareness by my everyday consciousness. All right? So on one level, what makes this whole planet, whatever, is spiritual energy. Now, our scientists are talking about string theory, where there's an interconnected something or other, energy, that's in everything. Mm-hmm. You name it, rocks, trees, flowers, people. Okay. Mystics have known about this since the beginning of time. It's what you're taught to experience in a mystical school.
Why is it got to be all? Why does it have to be all mystical and everything? Why can't it just come out of the shadows and into the light?
Well, it can during this time because of where we are in America. There were like only, I think, 2 other times in history where people could talk about this without getting killed. One was in the Middle Ages in Spain. Now, consider this discussion in England in the 1750s. Okay? They might kill me because I don't believe in the Church of England. I believe in this spiritual dust or something like that, you know. But what you're taught to connect with and be one with is that part of you which has this element in it and which is already connected with that in the universe. And now why is that important? Because then you know who you are on that level, and that helps you access and use other parts of yourself. One of the things that an exercise, spiritual exercise, helps with, like meditation. Meditation is usually used in a spiritual school in connection with meditation, concentration, and contemplation. If you learn to meditate, man, you know how to concentrate real good. Okay. That can help you at work very well. Okay, when your mind is, and our contemplation is something where that song is going on with that I'm connected to everything. I'm connected with everything. So there are these 3 levels of this kind of a thing. So there are basic skills that people don't learn that are the heritage of humanity.
Okay.
And that's what we live in, an age where we can have discussions about this without people being killed. The reason it was called mysticism because they had to cloud it in different things. In different ages, it was taught through alchemy. The gold that they were trying to transmute, the lead they were trying to transmute into gold, was the human soul. So right now, we could have a discussion about it, and you could say, "Oh, Stu, you're crazy, man. You know, you don't know what you're talking about." Or somebody could say, "Hey, maybe there's something there. Maybe I need to pay a little more attention to this." And that's what I'm in the process of doing on a little bit.
In the first hour, you started off talking about that through across religions and spectrums, that the human person has a void in them. Some have claimed that that void can only be filled by Jesus. Have you tried that? Have you tried asking Jesus to fill that void yourself?
Well, I'm not Catholic. My wife is Catholic, and my 2 daughters were raised Catholic. I certainly prayed to Jesus when I was in the church, and when I was there, once again, I was in a school that taught that all the religions were one on an inner level. There's something called the perennial philosophy. People like Houston Smith have written about this, that all the religions on an inner level are connected. They're all one at their highest levels. This energy, this experience of energy. On an external level, religions are different because they change based upon the culture that you're in. For example, when Jesus walked in Jerusalem 2,000 or so years ago, it was a man-based Godhead. It had to be a guy. It had to be a guy. You couldn't have gotten away with it being a woman. Okay. And it had to be in a form that they would understand, a person, a man. So that was one way that the religion was different. Now, in today's world, in our world in America, that teaching, that perennial teaching is being pushed through the behavioral sciences and the sciences. So what the sciences basically say is that there's an interconnecting element in the universe. The behavioral sciences will say something like, well, man has consciousness. He has all these levels of consciousness that we're learning about. And so that's how the teaching is being presented in modern America.
So from a religious standpoint, then it seems that you've taken some turns in your life, and you say that you met a person that really deeply affected you. But so what you're saying is that in the religious setting, you didn't find anything in there to fill that void, and so you kept searching.
Absolutely. On my family, side of the family, I'm descended from rabbis for hundreds of generations.
Wow.
And really, that was old and was worn out for me. It didn't mean anything for me. It wasn't that I was against religion. It just didn't fill what was inside of me. And in some ways I look at that as more my failing than their failing, because plenty of people get good feelings and enjoy that. To me, I was looking for something else. I was looking for an experience, and it was of the truth or the interconnectedness of everything in the universe, and that we're all connected. To me, you see, if there's any hope for the human race, if you will, it's this, that we're all sane. We're all the same.
In the mental health field, doctor, have you ever discussed with patients that the spiritual component side of life?
Absolutely, because a lot of people find a lot of comfort in it. And I remember once in teams, in the psychiatric hospitals, you work a lot in teams, and the psychiatrist, and I'm not a psychiatrist, was talking to somebody from a Hispanic background, and they were talking about that the reason that they were sick was that somebody put some black magic on them. They sent black magic for them, and that's why the demons were attacking them. And so they were talking about that. Now, very early on, people would have just shut the person up and said, you're crazy. There's no such thing as demons and black magic. And so him and his wife, the patient's wife, and the doctor, who was Hispanic background, went off to talk to him personally about that, because in his belief system, that was why he was sick. So that doctor was smart enough to incorporate that in with modern psychiatry.
But isn't, in fact, some people that seem to be mentally unstable actually have demon activity in their life?
I've wondered about that. I don't know, because I haven't experienced that. I don't know. I've wondered about that. That's something I don't really know.
And so in each of our missions that we have, and am I getting that we need to incorporate, we should look at what we're doing as bigger than an activity or something we like to do or we have to do, but that there's a spiritual worth in that, or we should address or always be aware of the spiritual part of what we're doing?
Well, all religious systems teach you that you want to be a better person, you have to help other people, right? Now, I remember when I was very young, when I was in my early 20s, whatever, because I didn't know who I was and I was still empty inside, the last thing I wanted to do was help somebody. Once I figured out who I was, what I was made of, what I needed for a complete life, because spirituality is one aspect of it, then I was able, naturally, to turn around and help other people. I mean, parents see this all the time. You see this all the time with parents. Some people have kids too early. They haven't found out who they are, and they resent their kids, and they treat them badly. And so the first part in a spiritual journey is figuring out who you are. What does that mean, who you are? Well, what am I good at? What don't I like? What do I want from life? I have things called emotions, and I have feelings, and I have thoughts, and I have skills, and I have abilities. And also people say there's something called spirituality. Is spirituality the same thing as religion? It's part of religion. It's the center of religion, but it's different than religion. Most religion is old and has served its purpose. In the belief system that I'm in, that we've learned about, is that the teaching is being updated every day by a living teacher. And a lot of the religious systems, you have this old dogma that's old, that doesn't work for people. And that wouldn't work for me. It might work for other people.
Who is this
teacher? So the first step for anybody is to figure out who they are.
Who's this? Who's doing the updating?
The teachers.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
This discussion right now is an updating.
Okay.
I'm throwing out to people the idea that most of religion is old and dead. Now, people can say, well, you're crazy.
No, I would agree religion is dead.
Well, I'm saying they could. Or I disagree with you. How dare you say this about my religion? You don't know it. And I'm throwing that out as a possibility, and that religion needs to be updated in a modern form. And I'm saying, we believe, and I'm saying that it's being updated through the behavioral sciences and the sciences. The scientists, astrophysicists in the 1950s, proved the existence of God by saying that there's something in the universe that connects everything.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that even God doesn't like religions, for that matter. Hey, let's go to entry.
You're right.
Let's go to entry 17. What I've learned. What was it?
I don't remember what I wrote. I can look at it.
Well, that's all right.
I mean, what I've learned in general. What I've learned is to work, love, and serve. Okay? A full life or a mature life. Now, obviously, we're not talking about an 8-year-old here. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a mature person. What you need for a reasonably full life, you need to work, whatever that means.
Okay.
For disabled people, work is different.
Okay.
You must work, love. You got to have somebody to love and someone love you. Mm-hmm. And serve. Serve. What does serve mean? Help other people and help yourself.
Okay, so now you felt like you do that, and is that something that you say you get in the habit of doing, that it just becomes automatic?
Yeah. We all have these sayings and these notions and ideas. If you put that in front of you every day, what am I going to do today? Well, I'm going to work. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm going to love somebody, and I'm going to serve somebody.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So what other lessons then can we learn from the early 1800s of Johnny Appleseed's life?
Well, he was an individualist. I mean, you're talking about a very colorful character, somebody whose life was clearly different than other people.
Would you consider him more of a socialist or a capitalist?
I wouldn't consider him either of those things. I would consider him Johnny Appleseed. I would consider him, not trying just to avoid your question, mm-hmm. I would just consider him as a unique person, human being. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was a socialist because he gave things away. He was a capitalist because he owned land, and that's what was necessary for him to grow the apple trees. Mm-hmm. Call it whatever he wanted. He did what he needed to do based upon who he was. Mm-hmm. We have these labels for people, right, that this and that. Well, yeah, that works a little bit, but that's not who he was. Mm-hmm. He was a soul. He was a person who came here to live a life. He lived in colonial America. He lived on the edge of the frontier. Husbandry was a common skill that people had, and he took that as the way to make his living, and he took it steps further. He took it that he was going to help people with herbs. He was going to be a medicine man to them, and he was going to teach them about something higher than himself. Lots of people, had those callings, but in as colorful a character as that, no, he was something special from that standpoint.
So if he was here today, would he have voted for Hillary or Trump?
He probably would have gone in the backyard and screamed.
Maybe he'd vote for Bernie. That seems more kind of like it.
Well, that's possible. I mean, here we are in America, and we're living in a two-party system. Give me a break. Mm-hmm. Come on. There aren't 15 people who should be president of the United States. Come on.
I'll tell you what, for the picture I got of you, Stuart, with that mustache, you take that mustache off, you kind of look like Bernie yourself.
Are you coming up with a new career for me? Is that what you're doing?
Just saying, man. Well, look, man, politics is void of spirituality. It is, it's combative. It's nasty. I don't know why it has to be like that, but is there any way that we can incorporate some sort of spirituality into politics, or is that always going to be this sort of secular, nasty thing that we all think that it is?
Well, first of all, people have that in them. And when we're talking about power, that's part of being a human being. Mm-hmm. And the only way that people could realize that the world could be better is that by helping each other, all right? Mm-hmm. And that's why we have to create better people. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the people who get attracted to politics are the people who are real good at this part of stuff, being nasty and mean and that kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. I think, and my real question becomes, is how come, 2 million white guys or women don't march on the Capitol of Washington, D.C. and sit in their rooms there and not let them do anything and just take it back from them. I mean, that sounds crazy and weird. I know that. But that's what it's going to take. They're not going to willingly give that up. But my answer to that is you create better people. Better people become better legislators, better senators, better this. And better people need to have an ounce of spirituality that talks to the point of that I need to help myself and help people the same way. I'm not saying treat people better than myself. I'm saying if I treat myself good, I need to treat my neighbor good. Because if my neighbor's hungry, one day he's going to come knocking on my door and ask me for food or take the food from me. And that's what's going to happen in a country like this. People forget this country was started by a revolution. The revolution was about some fellow named, I think it was Prince King George, taking money from people over here, not letting them govern. And people got sick and tired of that.
So politics has got to be more, or it has to be less of politicians helping themselves and more of helping the people.
That's right. That's right. Now, during revolutionary times, I think people could only serve for one term, and I think it was only 3 years. And then they went back to being farmers and stuff.
Back to the political scene. Who helped themselves more, Hillary or Trump?
What do you mean help themselves more?
In the political world, who helped themselves more, Trump or Hillary?
Well, yeah, Trump won. I mean, who knows what this is going to turn into, but he won.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, Hillary helped herself to hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm just saying. And most politicians...
Oh, yeah, well, she became a multimillionaire, so so did her husband.
Yeah, and I don't see any Johnny Appleseed qualities or hear any kind of spiritual deep things, say, in her books or in her writings that, where somebody would give her $200,000 to speak. I don't know. She couldn't. I don't think she would bring forth truisms and things that on the order of Johnny Appleseed. I mean, what if somebody actually did bring those things to the people? I mean, wouldn't that be a good thing?
Well, I think it would. I mean, in this climate, that someone like that couldn't get elected. The climate would have to change. I mean, one thing that Donald did is that he changed the climate. You can say anything you want, just about, and get away with it. I mean, one of the things that Hillary wrote, I think she wrote a book on how to raise children or something, and she used an old African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. And that stuck with me because when I said, well, what does that mean to raise a village? It takes a village to raise a child. Yeah. Well, it takes the experiences of all the people in the village imparting their wisdom to the child so the child will be complete. Well, so that means that the medicine man teaches him something, the blacksmith teaches him something, the warrior teaches him something, the mother teaches him something. And so I can't. That was one of the nice things that I learned from her.
Well, while I'm glad she pilfered that from the African community, you would have thought that she would.
That's right. That's right. She did.
You would have thought that she'd take some of those hundreds of millions of dollars and help some of the inner city African communities, and I'm not seeing where she's done that. I mean, I would have liked that. I would have wished she did that. I don't see there's anything out there. I don't think it's giving when you say use the blunt instrument coercion of government to help somebody else. If somebody really wants to help, if she wants to help raise in the village, she needs to be out in the village, not in Washington, D.C. or Chappaqua or the Clinton Foundation. She needs to be down in that village helping out. And in the 30, 40 years I've been watching her, I've never ever seen her show up in the village and help out.
Well, that was why it was very hard to make a decision in this election. I don't want to get into an argument about it. I happen to agree. It was very hard to vote for her. It was very hard to vote for him. Yeah. From my viewpoint. I mean, to me, the sad part was this is the best we got in 350 million people.
I've said the same thing. I agree. I agree with you there.
That part made me cry. And what I'm saying is I'm looking at the world. I'm a grandfather. I have grandkids. This is the world that I've helped create because I worked in it. And the only thing that makes any sense to me is that the discussion needs to be about how do we make better people.
And we can use, and what you're saying is we can learn lessons from Johnny Appleseed. And speaking of him, and obviously he's got an awesome story that nobody's really ever heard of in depth. And certainly they can get your book, the Appleseed Journal, and from the link on our website that you put in your bio as well. But is there anybody else in antiquity that matches the sort of the traveling aspects of giving and spirituality as Johnny Appleseed, or is he a giant among his peers?
Well, no, there are many. There are Sufi orders called the Kalendars.
Well, wait a minute. Wait. The Sufi in America?
Sufis are mystics.
Yeah, but there's Sufis in America?
Yeah, I know some.
See, I always thought that was a Japanese food.
No. I like that.
Well, Sufi, have a bowl of Sufi. You know what I'm saying?
Priests who go around like Johnny Appleseed just begging. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are people like that. In our country, we don't do that. Okay? In our country, you go to work every day. Mm-hmm. I mean, in their culture, that's what they would do. My teacher, I remember him saying to me one time, he said, look, if I was in my country right now, and this is a physician, he's a physician, got a family, everything like that, I would give up all of this, take the begging bowl, and go beg from door to door. But in this country, the way is different. In our country right now, we need Johnny Appleseeds of the spirit, mm-hmm. going to work every day, making the world better. Mothers there and, mm-hmm. loving their children, whatever.
Doctor, can an old cowboy from the Midwest be a Johnny Appleseed of today?
You are one, man. I saw that on your website. You're a cosmic cowboy?
Yeah.
You're already there, babe.
Yes. Man, I have arrived. I've become the perfected one.
Just for I don't know if you're married, but I'm sure if I asked your wife, she'd have a different point of view.
No, I'm not married. Just a single cowboy riding a story range, all alone there.
Well, like I said, we all have the capacity to reach higher, and you certainly have.
Well, all right, Doctor, we've come to the end of the program. It's been awesome to be with you, man. I mean, this is the edge I've created it to be a very large table to take in all sorts of viewpoints about every subject. So I don't think you can get all the information about life and nuggets of truth from being a single topic person. And so I really like what you brought to the program tonight. Anything you'd like to say about your books or your website, you go ahead.
Well, like I said, check me out. It's Bitkoff, Bitkoff. Google me. And there's plenty of free stuff. Also on Amazon, there's about 6 books. I have a new book coming out in about a month. And, learn something, see something, try something new. And thank you for having me on the show.
And plant an apple tree.
Eat an apple.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you so much, Dr. Stuart Bitkoff.
Thank you.
You bet.